Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 3 of the Engineered Impact podcast. I wanted to start today by sharing a quote from The Richest Man in Babylon, which is one of my absolute all-time favorite books about money. If you've not read this book, you need to go pick it up and check it out. It's a super quick, easy read, whether you get the book, whether you listen to the audiobook. Phenomenal book. And the thing I love about it is I love principles, things that I learn that are true, that I can apply in different situations. And this book is chock full of financial principles, right? Things that apply in any age, and regardless of circumstances. The principles taught in this book will help you become wealthier. Okay. So the quote I wanted to share is out of the first story in this book. And it's about two guys that go and they talk to a friend. These two guys are poor and they're tired of being poor. They have a friend from when they were childhood friends. And they go and they ask him, how did you get so rich? Okay. And this is what he said. I found the road to wealth when I decided that a part of all I earned was mine to keep, and so will you. Okay. So building wealth all starts with saving, right? Now I'm guessing if you're here, if you're listening to this, I'm guessing you're already a good saver. If you're like me and probably most corporate employees who are interested in financial freedom, I'm guessing that you've already become something of a miracle worker when it comes to stretching your paycheck, right? Every 2 weeks, that check has to cover your taxes and the rent or the mortgage and food and a car payment and maybe pay for soccer and ballet for the kids, right? It's all these things that your money's got to go to. But you become a miracle worker at stretching that paycheck so that there's something left to put in your 401k, right, to go towards financial freedom. And it's going to be a slow, steady grind towards retirement, but you are committed to it, right? Or maybe you're pursuing more of the minimalist approach to hit financial freedom. You want to get there as fast as possible. And maybe you're frustrated that you only saved 40% of your paycheck last year, and you're seriously contemplating the fact that if you were to eat those wilting vegetables in your refrigerator, you might be able to eke out another 1% of savings, and put that towards hitting financial freedom sooner, right? So whatever your situation, whatever your approach to financial freedom, saving is painful, right? It just is. There's never enough. It never happens fast enough. And it can only happen if you're diligent and you sacrifice something else, right? Unfortunately, that sacrifice means you're going without things that you want, right? There's things that you wish you could buy. There's things that you wish you could do. There's things that you wish you could give your family that you just can't do, right? And unfortunately, every year it gets harder, right? Inflation is this slow, silent eroder of your wealth, right? And so every year, the cost of living goes up, it gets harder to save, right? Now, because of the pain and sacrifice that goes into saving, I hope you agree with me that any dollar that you're able to save is a very precious asset, right? Because it's an acknowledgement of not only your sacrifice, but of everything else or of everything that you gave up to save that dollar, right? For yourself. To keep that portion, just like in the book, to pay yourself, right? So looking at it that way, if we look at it as this dollar is one of the most precious dollars you'll ever have, this is an acknowledgement of my sweat equity and of sacrifice. I hope you'll agree with me that that dollar should be put to use in the highest, most efficient, most profitable use we can find for it, right? Obviously, okay? So doing anything else would be crazy, right? We're not gonna purposely put our dollars to work in something that's not going to give us the best return. Okay, so what do we do with our dollars, right? Well, for most people, when we save, the first place we go is the qualified retirement plan we have at work, right? Now, maybe for you, that's a 401k, maybe it's a 403b, a 457, or some kind of a government plan. But whatever it is, most people with a job have some kind of qualified retirement plan, right? And that's where most people are going to go first to save their money. Why is that? Have you ever stopped and thought about that? I will bet that just like me, the first time you ask that question, what do I do with my savings, right? I'm a responsible person. I'm going to sacrifice. I want to be financially free. So I'm going to save. Well, where do you save, right? Well, if you're like everybody else, the first time you ask that question, most people probably said, well, oh man, you got to put it in a 401k, right? Why? And I'm just going to use a 401k for all of those retirement plans. You got to put it in a qualified plan, right? Why is that? Why does everybody recommend that? Well, the sales pitch sounds pretty good, right? You put your dollars in there. chances are you're getting some kind of a match, right? Which is quote unquote free money, and you'd be crazy to turn that down, right? Who doesn't want free money? You get to put all those dollars away before you pay any tax on them. So you get to grow your taxes, right? Your wealth grows faster because you're saving on your taxes, right? The account is structured so that it's got heavy penalties where if you take it out beforehand, you get penalized, right? You lose 10% of everything you saved to take it out before you're 59 and a half years old, right? So the government has been so kind that not only are they going to let you keep your tax dollars to save, but they're also going to discourage you and protect you from yourself from doing something stupid like taking money out before you're ready to retire, right? And finally, while your money's sitting in this account, you can rest assured that your precious dollars that you saved and you scrimped and you sacrificed for are being watched over and invested in a well-diversified portfolio, mutual funds full of stocks and bonds, either selected by an expert fund manager who knows exactly what he's doing, or in an index fund that's tracking some specific index, right? Because that's the miracle pill on Wall Street, okay? And over the course of your career, these experts that put these funds together are going to assure you that as faithful stewards of your money, they're going to grow your money at an eye-watering 8 to 12% on average every year, right? Well, heck, that sounds pretty good, right? All I got to do is show up at work, earn my paycheck, tell HR to put a certain percentage of it away in my qualified plan throughout my whole career. Maybe occasionally revisit, my index fund mix, sit down with my financial advisor and make sure that, my investments are set for my risk tolerance, right? And then when it's all over, when I'm ready to retire, I go back to Mr. Market and I say, hey, I'm ready for my qualified plan, right? Wall Street's going to hand over a pot of gold that you've built up over 30 or 40 years. And now you get to go travel and visit your grandchildren. You get to go buy the Corvette that you've always wanted. You get to do the things that you've waited to do and sacrificed to do, and live out your golden years, right? That's how it's supposed to work, right? Well, that sounds pretty awesome, right? And most of us buy into this plan without really questioning the conventional wisdom, right? Everybody else is doing it. Any financial advisor or expert or person on a financial show on TV or book or whatever is going to tell you this is the way to go. So it must be the right thing to do, right? So we dutifully start working. We start pumping money into these qualified plans, right? I did it. Chances are you're doing it. And if you don't do it, if you're not doing it, chances are you've had more than one person tell you you're nuts. You're giving up free money. You're paying too much in taxes. You're missing out on this 8 to 12%, right? You're never going to have enough money to retire because you're not putting it away in this account. How do I know that? Because that's what happens to me. For years, people told me I'm nuts because I don't invest in a qualified plan. I'm going to be honest, okay? But I did. I used to, okay? So that's how most of us do it, right? Well, all right. So if that's the sales pitch, if that's what most of us are doing, what I want you to do is consider that maybe most of what you've learned about money isn't right. Maybe what we've been sold about these plans isn't totally true, okay? So let me ask you something maybe nobody's ever asked you before, okay? What if these plans aren't all they're cracked up to be? What if the things that are touted as benefits of these plans are actually enormous risks to your financial well-being now and in the future? What if you get to the end of the rainbow in 20 or 30 or 40 years and what Wall Street hands you doesn't quite look like the pot of gold that you were expecting? When we subscribe to this conventional path and we spend 30 or 40 years working towards it, we dump all our money into this qualified plan, we only get one shot, right? It's hard to go back and repeat that 30 or 40 years. And if you spend those decades hoping this plan works out and the pot of gold isn't there for you, unfortunately, there's only two options, right? You can either cut way back on your dream life, or you have to redo the 30 or 40 years. You got to keep working to make ends meet, right? So basically, this whole plan is built on hope, right? We got to hope that the market grows the way we're told it will. We have to hope that tax rates don't go up too much. We have to hope that inflation's not too high. We have to hope that the market doesn't crash right when we're ready to retire, right? It's one thing to happen when you're in your 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s to have the market crash. And everybody will tell you, well, just remember you're in it for the long haul, right? Well, that's okay. You've got time to recover. But when you're in your 50s, when you're in your 60s, that doesn't work out. So right now it's April 2020. We're in the middle of quarantines and the COVID-19 crisis. And earlier this year, most people's 401ks were down 30%. Right now it's come back some, but I have a friend, guy I've worked with for years, who retired at the end of March, right? At the bottom of this. He lost 30% of his retirement account going into retirement, right? Now we hope that it never happened, okay? But he had no control over that, okay? And that to me is one of the huge risks in these plans is they're based on hope, right? And personally, hope has never sounded like a great financial strategy to me because you can't control it, right? I've always been more inclined to find certainty, okay? So thinking about certainty, let me ask you some questions, right? Is the 401k the path to wealth and security for the masses, okay? Well, how certain do you feel that your 401k is going to allow you to live a wealthy life when you retire? And I'm not talking about you're going to be able to buy a mansion and a Ferrari. Like, I'm not talking about wealthy like that, but wealthy in terms of you're going to be able to do the things that you want. You're not going to have to worry about money, right? How confident that you won't outlive your 401k balance in retirement? How much certainty do you have that your 401k balance will allow you to weather the rising costs of taxes and the cost of living in the future? How much confidence do you have that your 401k will allow you to retire when you want to retire, right? I've talked several times about, people that I saw in the recession, and again, just my friend just recently that got a huge sucker punch right as they were about to go into retirement. So they either had to retire with a lot less than they planned on, or they had to delay their retirement, okay? Is your 401k going to allow you to choose when you retire? How often is your 401k actually growing at the same rate as the stock market? Did you know there's actually a huge discrepancy between the rate that the market grows every year and actual individual investor performance? I didn't know that when I started. So what I want you to understand is the reason I'm asking these questions is because these are the kinds of hard questions I had to start asking myself almost a decade ago. Okay. May of 2010, I was just graduating with my master's degree in engineering. Okay. I was on cloud nine. I never had to go back to school. I was thrilled to death about it. Okay. So as I got back to living a normal life and I looked at all the money that my wife and I had saved in our 401k while I'd been working and going to school, it'd been about 3 years. And as a 30 something, I guess I was almost 30 at the time, it looked like a small fortune. Okay. I don't remember what it was, but it looked like a small fortune. And I was very proud of our little nest egg and all the hard work and all the sacrifice that it represented. But at the same time, all of the pain, all of the devastation I'd seen, with friends, with coworkers in the economy and the world from the Great Recession, all of that was still fresh on my mind. And I thought, now that I've got all this time on my hands, I'm only working, I'm not having to study at night and on the weekends, I should really start to figure out how to invest all this money that I've been saving so that I don't end up like those other poor guys who lost a ton of money right as they were about to retire and couldn't, right? So I started researching, well, how do I invest? Okay, and it started really simply. I didn't want to be rich. I just want to know, how do I make sure that I had a solid handle on my money, on how it was invested, and to make sure that it was invested in such a way that it was going to grow at that 8 to 10% that I'd been promised, and that it wasn't going to fall 50 or 60% right when I needed it most. Well, it didn't take long, just Google searches and talking to people for me to start to find some things that made me stop and go, I quickly found that even when I talked to people that I thought knew a lot about money, that had degrees in accounting or finance, that I would have thought knew a lot about investing, they didn't really have that much more confidence than I did when it came to what was happening inside their 401ks. I'd gotten into politics. I've mentioned this before. I got into politics and studying economics. And I started hearing about countries in Europe and countries in South America who were struggling to recover still in 2010, 2011 from the recession. And a number of countries started nationalizing, which is political speak for confiscating private retirement funds, just like 401ks. Okay, they were going to people and saying, we're going to take that and we'll take care of you, right? But they basically took these people's life savings, okay? Whole countries, this was happening. Again, like I mentioned a minute ago, I learned that the average investor was only making like 5% in the stock market, which was a heck of a lot worse than the 8 to 12% that I'd been promised when I got into this whole thing. I started learning that when I got to the back end of this, when Wall Street handed me my pot of gold and I started getting taxed on my withdrawals, that I was going to be taxed at the highest rates. Okay, in some cases, almost double what those same dollars would have been taxed at if I just taken them out of my paycheck and invested them in a brokerage account. Okay, if I'd invested outside my 401k, I would have been taxed way less. That seems screwed up. I started learning about the enormous impact that even small management fees were going to have on my long-term gains. Okay. So as I started doing all this research, I started to get a different picture of the 401k than what I'd been pitched. It was becoming more and more clear to me that while I was working, I was putting all of the money in this 401k. I was taking all of the risk. I was making all of the sacrifice. During the 30 or 40 years that I was planning to do this, Wall Street was going to be getting rich and my employer was going to be getting rich, right? My company, because they didn't have to be funding a pension for me. Wall Street was going to be getting rich because they were going to be milking this money for fees for decades before I'd ever see it, right? And then I realized that at 5% growth a year, my money was barely keeping pace with inflation during my career, okay? And then I'm doing the math. I'm looking at, the fact that the government was printing money like crazy. They were having $1 trillion a year deficits. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, I was told that when I retire, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket, but I'm sure having a hard time believing that taxes are going to be lower 30 or 40 years from now when the government's spending money like crazy. That just didn't compute with me. And then out on the fringe, again, I'm seeing these countries that are nationalizing retirement funds, and I'm thinking, what happens if I get to the end of this and my government's broke and they've raised taxes, but maybe it's still not enough, and they just come along one day and they say, you know what, Dan, we really need that money, and they just take it. What am I going to do about it? Okay. Now, maybe that's tin hat stuff. Maybe that's crazy conspiracy theory stuff, but it was happening. Okay. When I was doing this research, this was actually happening in the world. Okay. So it can't be that tin hat, right? So, as I thought about all that stuff, as you think about all that stuff, does that sound like a good deal to you? Because it sure didn't to me. So I basically concluded that my 401k was designed to make my company rich. It was designed to make Wall Street rich, and it was designed to make the government rich. And I felt like if there was anything left for me when they were all done with it, it was kind of a happy accident, right? Like there was no design for me to be wealthy. There was no design for me to be okay when this was all over. So in January 2011, I made an extremely difficult decision. I stopped contributing to my 401k, and everyone that I shared that with told me I was an idiot. Some of them nicely, some of them not so nicely. Everybody thought I was crazy. To be perfectly honest, I thought I was kind of crazy because I had no idea what I was going to do with the money. I was still saving diligently. I was never going to stop saving because, again, paying myself is the beginning of wealth, right? That is the foundational habit to building wealth. So I was not going to stop saving, but I didn't know what to do with the money. I knew it was worthless to keep in a savings account, right? The bank was going to be pay me even less than a 401k was, or a stock account was. But I didn't know what to do with it. Now, it took me almost 3 years to figure out an alternative, but eventually I found a much, much better alternative, something that I have an extreme level of confidence in, something that's provided a high degree of certainty that it will turn out the way I want it to. Okay. That's going to be a conversation, a story for another day. But tonight, I want to ask you a couple of questions. All right. First, let me say congratulations. If you're here, I'm guessing you're already a saver. I'm guessing you built that habit. That habit alone is more likely to make you rich than anything else you do, and more likely to be rich than just about everybody you know, right? But I want you to ask two questions. Because you're a saver, because you're making those sacrifices, you're going through that pain to pursue financial freedom. I want to ask you two questions, right? First, how much do you want to protect and grow the dollars that you have sacrificed so much for? Okay. How important is it to you to be sure that you have put those dollars to use in the highest, most efficient way? Okay. And number two, if you were to stop putting those hard-earned dollars into a qualified retirement plan, what would you do? Do you have any idea? Where would you go? Who would you ask? How would you figure out what else to do with those dollars? Okay. So I'll share my answer next time, but I want to leave you with those two thoughts. That's it for today. We will talk to you next time on Engineered Impact.